The whole theory of evolution is based upon the idea that men and apes evolved from a common ancestor. And that theory was backed up by the discovery of strange skeletons that neither belonged to humans nor to apes. The assumption was made that these skeletons belonged to a different species of hominids that were in the process of evolution from an ape-like ancestor into the modern human being. Also, the assumption was made that these skeletons belonged to species that are now extinct. But what if they did not belong to an extinct species, and in fact belonged to a species that still lives on the earth today? An undiscovered people, so to speak, that were not human like you, nor were they animals like apes or chimpanzees. This discovery of an unknown race of beings that share our planet would not only be one of the most important discoveries in human history, but it would shatter the theory of evolution. Imam Ahmed al-Hasan alayhi salam has spoken about a race of beings called the Haytan. He said, if you were to see them, you would consider them to be unintelligent, as they would resemble to you monkeys and apes, and their clothing is simple, and yet they have a very high degree of spiritual understanding. He said, they are the ones whom the scientists call the Homo erectus and the Homo habilis, and ancestors to the modern human. Imam Ahmed al-Hasan alayhi salam said that the Haytan still live on earth today in great numbers out in the wilderness and in hiding from mankind. Sometimes people do witness these Haytan. We decided to look into the sightings people have had of this creature, which led us to what people call the Yeti or the Sasquatch. The Sasquatch is a giant ape-like creature which is claimed to exist in the wilderness. Thousands and thousands of witnesses have claimed to have seen the Sasquatch in history. Many of them considered to be trustworthy witnesses, such as police officers and PhDs. Some have even taken video and photographic evidence of the Sasquatch and have captured their footprints. We found out that Dr. Jeff Meldrum and Dr. John Bindernagel, two of the world's most respected authorities on this topic, had recently been featured on a documentary called Discovering Bigfoot. Dr. Meldrum is a professor of anatomy and anthropology and a professor of the Department of Anthropology at Idaho State University. Meldrum is an expert on foot morphology and locomotion in primates, and has specialized in the study of the Sasquatch, while Dr. Bindernagel was a wildlife biologist who sought evidence for Bigfoot since 1963, and in 1998 he published a book by the name of North America's Great Ape, the Sasquatch. In this documentary, Discovering Bigfoot, these two PhDs go on an expedition with Mr. Todd Standing. Todd Standing has for over a decade appeared in hundreds of newspapers, radio shows, and television interviews all over the world. He has appeared twice on the Discovery Channel's Survivor Man, he has appeared on Animal Planet's Finding Bigfoot, and he is the producer of his own documentary out on Netflix called Discovering Bigfoot. During this expedition, the two experts state their belief and interest in Todd Standing's videos, which he captured of this creature, and one of the doctors even witnessed a Sasquatch on the trip. I took the extraordinary photographs and video that belonged to Mr. Todd Standing back to Imam Ahmed al-Hasan alayhi salam and asked him about it. Imam Ahmed al-Hasan alayhi salam confirmed that they were real videos and photographs of the Haytan, and he also confirmed that the Sasquatch and the Haytan were one and the same. At this point, we packed our bags, tracked down, and met up with Mr. Todd Standing, where we sat down to discuss the Haytan. The whole theory of evolution is based upon the idea that men and apes evolved from a common ancestor. And that theory is backed up by the discovery of strange skeletons that neither belong to humans nor to apes. The assumption was made that these skeletons belonged to a different species of hominids that were in the process of evolution into the modern human being, and they are considered to be the grand evidence of the theory of evolution. But what if these skeletons did not belong to an extinct species, and what if they in fact belong to a species that still lives on the earth today? Well, then that would mean that the greatest evidence for the theory of evolution just went out the window. We wanted to talk to you about Bigfoot.
Yes.
And your experiences. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you got interested into this topic?
Yes. First, I'd like to say Assalamu alaikum. Is that perfect?
That's perfect.
I can do it one more time. Say it with an accent.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. That sounded better? Assalamu alaikum. So I've been researching, I've been a wilderness expert since I was a little boy. So yeah, I've been studying wildlife. I'm passionate about the wilderness, not just in Canada, but all over the world. I find animals, trees, plant life, vegetation, wildlife fascinates me. It always has. So being a student even of biology, the fact that a large giant primate surviving in the wilderness could exist blew my mind. So in the beginning, I was certain it couldn't have existed. So in the beginning, what I tried to do as a biologist and a wilderness expert was to prove they couldn't exist in the ecology. So I went out into the ecology and I found the real experts were the First Nations people and Native Americans. They're the only people that have ever lived in North America and are actual indigenous people. I know Muslims understand what it means to be an indigenous person with a history that goes back to your forefathers, an oral history of all the land and all the culture and how to survive. And they're the only ones that have ever done that in North America. And these people know Sasquatch exists, which perplexed me. How can an expert with such a rich history of culture in North America say this species exists when I knew it couldn't exist? So I was very skeptical at first, but as I started moving forward and I started meeting people, earning indigenous people's respect and them earning mine, we built this amazing relationship that led me to the understanding that the species is real. And it blew my mind. This is what I always teach people when I'm taking them on an expedition. And this is ground zero. This is the foundation to help people understand Sasquatch. This is an old native oral tradition. A long time ago, they say the Great Spirit came to man and to Sasquatch and offered them fire, which represented technology. And the Great Spirit said to the Sasquatch and to man, this fire will cook your food, it will keep you safe, it will keep you warm, it will help nourish you, it will give you many great things. But it is technology. And once you accept this technology, you can never go back to the raw wilderness the way you are now. And it will lead you down a path of technology. It will encompass your whole life. And it'll just get stronger and stronger. It'll pull you away from the wilderness. And the Native American people took this technology, accepted fire. And the Sasquatch did not, because the Sasquatch, more than the Native American people, loved the wilderness. And now what's happened is the Sasquatch know this story as well. And they've seen how all humans, including the indigenous people who they used to have relationships with, have been so brainwashed by technology, so removed from the wilderness that they've learned over time that the Great Spirit was right. It removed them from the wilderness. And now the Native American people are further away from the spirituality, the love, the passion from the wilderness than ever. The great trackers are more and more rare. And tracking just doesn't mean following animals in the wilderness. It means surviving. It means understanding the trees and nature and the wind and all these things. And technology has removed us from that. And the Sasquatch know this. They're aware of it. If you leave them an axe, if you leave them a blanket, they won't touch it. Because they know that technology, that blanket that keeps you warm, the hair will start coming off your body, right? You'll lose, when you have a gun to shoot, you'll lose the ability to grab an animal and
break its neck and eat it, right? You rely on a gun. Without a gun now, you can't survive. And the Sasquatch have never touched technology. It's clear to me they fear technology, and most importantly, the insanity of it. When you forget where you come from, when you move away from the wildness, from nature, which is what we are, we're natural beings, we're spiritually designed to be a certain way. Technology removes that from us, and the Sasquatch have seen this. Even the Native Americans, the shaman, see this, and they say, please, let's go back. But like the Great Spirit said, there is no going back. What are we going to do, grow body hair, get stronger and bigger, and be able to survive in the... We're not. It'll never happen. It's not going to happen. We're moving away from that. And the Sasquatch never will. They stay away from it all. They fear it because they still feel the earth on their feet. They still feel, when they drink the water, they feel the energy of life around them. They feel that spiritual energy. They touch a tree and see that it's old and ancient and it's wise. And we don't do that anymore. As we've grown more technologically advanced in society, they've gone more advanced spiritually, I guess you would say, in the wilderness. They've become more natural. Isn't that amazing? You're talking about a species that has become more natural, even, and I would argue too, more spiritual. You lose nature. Nature is God. Nature is the universe. Nature is the sun, is life. And they've embraced that, and we move away from it with electronics and technology and our dumps. Look at we do the ocean. I mean, it should be clear to everybody, our technology is very, very damaging in a lot of ways, and it's got to stop. I don't know that it can. So I don't know what the answer is, but maybe the Sasquatch do, because they're clearly spiritually and wise and connected to nature, connected to the earth, so much more than we are. You can see this, can't you? So, and that's the foundation. That's the start of when you go into the wilderness with your technology and all your gadgets and stuff. Don't think you can show that to Sasquatch, because to them it's insanity. To them it's negativity. To them it pulled them away from what they love. They love the wilderness. They're so patient. How many people, I can even see it around me, people being uncomfortable. Maybe I'm talking too long. Maybe I'm taking too much time to say things. You know, people get uncomfortable. People want information. They want it now, and they want a lot of it. The Sasquatch aren't like that. They'll sit down in a spot and look at a tree that's hundreds of years old and stay there for days and just admire the tree, because it's old and ancient and wise, and it's living. It has roots that go everywhere, and they're all connected. And they feel this because they're patient, because they're calm. They have true serenity in their heart. You could not be more patient than a Sasquatch. He'll sit there and be happy. Do you understand? Like when we walk down trails and we feel comfortable. They walk on a trail and they're very not comfortable. They want to be in the wilderness. They want to be blanketed by the trees. That's their home. That's what they love. Does this make sense? They're almost the exact opposite of us. As we become technologically advanced, they become, what do you say, naturally advanced? Naturally advanced? And it is spiritual, deeply spiritual. We take little pills so we can get our nutrients that they get right out of the water. From the water goes to the rock and gets all these little metals and zinc and stuff, and they drink that water and they get all those nutrients that we can't get unless we have these pills, because we make water that strips those nutrients. There's no nutrients in this water, but you drink from the river and you get it, you know? So you eat the indigenous foods. You were built by God. You were built and designed to live here in this land. It's what God gave you. It's what the universe put there for you. And that's what they survive off, not with plastic and technology and water and chemicals. That stuff is terrifying to them, and it's starting to scare me. They're large, giant primates, and what's the most amazing thing about them is they are the ultimate wilderness species. They're the highest level of apex in the biology, and their intelligence, their spirituality, their magnificence in the wilderness, how they thrive in the harshest environments where no other human being has survived. Even the Native Americans have had technology. They have spears and bows and arrows and fire, teepees. This hominid species, and I will say hominid, the evolution of my research went from animal to primate to now realizing they're clearly a hominid species, the most man-like species on the planet, survive in perfect equilibrium within the forest and the wilderness. And I've learned that not only does that require significant intelligence and abilities, body composition, hair, fat, hearing, sight, smell, but it also requires a level of love and passion to survive there. They love the wilderness. And that's what's also had this outcome of they are undiscovered because they don't want to leave the wilderness. They don't want to embrace technology, they fear it because technology separates you from the wilderness entirely. And nobody's going to argue that. The more technology that we have, clothes, heat, vehicles, the further we move away from trees and the natural world, nature. Technology is really almost the opposite of nature, isn't it? So they fear it for that reason. They fear the way they see us and what they would consider, and without even pulling any punches, the insanity that technology has led us to. Social media, politics, corruption, media itself, newspapers. It's real. There's the truth and the integrity of it it's so thin. And in the wilderness, it's nothing but that. If you don't live by truth and integrity, then you don't survive. A lot of what I have and the knowledge that I have is deduced based on the reality of where we are right now. What I can deduce from this species is they're devoted to one another. They're passionate about one another. They stand together at all times. They move as a group and a cooperation at all times. When you have that kind of devotion, you can, and also a very rare species. They live in the harshest environments where men do not live. The harshest, coldest places where we can't even survive. That's where they thrive. That's where they're happy. And the more nature, the harsher the environment is, we would call it, to them it's more beautiful, it's more lush, it's more tranquil. So they survive in these remote areas where there are places in North America where men have never been. Even the First Nations people, when I'll go looking for where Sasquatch are, I go talk to the indigenous people, and usually what they call the place is don't go there. Stay away from there. That's what I go, oh, it's called don't go there? Oh, that's where the Sasquatch are. And they go, yeah. That's why we don't go there, because we respect them, we respect their land. So knowing that they live in the harshest environments, knowing that they're a rare species, and knowing that they're devoted to one another, I have a knowledge too that it's quite clear to me they put their dead, and they always have put their dead in a spot. And they protect that spot voraciously, as any culture would protect a place where fathers and mothers and sisters and brothers are buried. It's holy ground. It's always been that way with hominids, all the way back to the Neanderthals. And we even have evidence in a place called Luncheng, China, where they found Gigantopithecus bones high up in a cave that you had to rock climb to. Hundreds of bones from males and females. They know there's sexual dimorphism within the species, meaning males are much larger than females, which means there's competition between males. In every species, when the male is significantly larger, like lions or gorillas, there's fighting between males, so you get this competition. But that also leads to cooperation. That leads to a lead male that has a group that he loves and he's devoted to. And again, you get that family unit when you have this sort of system in nature, which they clearly have. And it's clear to me there are areas they defend voraciously within, I've seen it in Montana, Oregon, Alberta, British Columbia. So it's quite, by deduction, I'm deducing, and my theory is they keep their bodies in a specific place. And it's research that will be at the end of this knowledge. It doesn't start in the beginning. You don't go into a holy place where you're not allowed when you go meet a new culture. If I went into your graveyards where you have your and started desecrating the area, there's going to be a fight, right? It's very disrespectful. So that's my theory, and I stick with that for now until further information is deduced. What they do is, to a tracker, any little bent blade of grass means something. An impression in the sand is a sign of a track from an animal or a human. And to them, those impressions are so obvious. When they take a branch and they break it, and they put it in the ground and move it in a certain way, that's communication to them. The Native Americans have done this, where you'll be walking along a trail and they'll put a stick on another stick in a certain way, and that means, be careful, there's a bear going over that way. Or the elk are moving to the left, and if you want to go hunt them, that's where the best elk hunting is. Indigenous people have been doing that with just branches and trees. And clearly, to me, the Sasquatch, I've seen things, I've gone into the harshest backcountry where there's no sign of any human ever. and seen intricate structures and broken branches and triangles that they make. And those are clearly forms of communication. They're not just randomly put out there. They mean something. They're a natural language that they would use because they don't use paints, right? They don't use any kind of technology. The old Native Americans used to use paintings and paint on the wall. That was their art and culture. Sasquatch don't embrace that kind of, they won't use any kind of technology to communicate. They use the wilderness. So stick structures, broken structures that mean something. These are all very significant to them. And as far as communication, when the Sasquatch come around me and dominate me, that's the only term I can really use. Again, I'm a wilderness expert. If human beings were around, I'm not going to get dominated. I'm going to be the dominant one. I've been out with the best in the world, military rangers and trained scouts and trackers, hunters. It's quite clear to me that I have an obvious advantage over them in my indigenous terrain. When a Sasquatch dominates me so strongly, I'm profoundly dominated. I feel like a child. And I see how they're around me. One Sasquatch is over here and one's over here, and they're in constant communication with each other by some form that I don't understand. They just have a knowledge, and they know where they are, and they know where each of them are, and they move in a coordinated fashion, similar to what perhaps military would do when they have communication devices that they're actually talking to each other. Obviously, Sasquatch don't have that, but they do. Even the way you can feel their presence. Everybody understands, you know, when you feel like you're being watched, and even in us, as pathetic as we are, surrounded by technology, lights, look at me, the buzzing sounds I can hear right now, the electromagnetic fields that are not natural, all around me, disrupting my natural sensory perceptions, my sixth sense. When you go into the wilderness, you require that for survival. And when you're an apex species that is indigenous and born and raised, and that's all you ever do is rely on that sense, you can feel your way around. Even I've heard it in the Aboriginal people of all the way, not just from North America, all the way into even Australia. You feel your way through the wilderness. You feel the energy of where you're going and where to be and how to move. And when you get a heightened sense of that, you can feel where your people are. Love builds a connection. A father feels pain in his knee, and his son somewhere else, his knee is injured. They have a heightened sense of this sensory perception. It's very clear to me because I've felt it. And people that go out with me, it's profound how much we feel it. As ignorant as we are, we feel it. And it's quite clear to me that their ability to communicate with each other that way, through feelings, through love, through the wilderness. Maybe it's through the roots of all nature. There's some energy out there that I can't explain. It's more art, it's more spiritual. And it's very clear to me they have this ability to communicate with each other. I've seen it over great distances, where the best example is day watchers that surround the main group as they sleep. My main group that I study in British Columbia, they seem to be nocturnal and sleep during the day. So while the main group sleeps during the day, they have day watchers that protect sentinels that watch over the group and make sure nobody approaches. And these sentinels, two of them were kilometers apart and could not possibly see or hear each other by any known technology that I know. So when I go and disrupt one day watcher, and my colleague is watching the other day watcher, and both being kilometers and kilometers apart, instantaneously react to me. Well, this one saw me, but how did this one know immediately, over a great distance, that something was wrong, that the alert was sounded? No sound was made, no booming through the ground that I could ever know of that exists. So clearly to me, they have a way to communicate over great distances. 4 kilometers is significant, instantaneously, somehow. So these are the facts that I'm aware of, and to deduce what that is, it's hard to explain because it's not science. It's spiritual, it's deep, it's something I feel in my heart, and it's something that I'm teaching other people that come out with me, and we all know it, we all feel it. I spoke to you about it. Anybody talk to any human being. Have you ever been in a spot where you're alone and you hear nothing, you smell nothing, you see nothing, and yet you'll feel to look over there, and you look and somebody was looking at you? How do you know that? And I can't express enough. We don't practice that, do we? It's just something that's naturally embedded in us. Can you imagine if we were born that way and taught to be that? If we lived in serenity and quiet, in spirituality and nature all day, that sense would be powerful. Does this make sense? And it's clear to me that that sense is very powerful in them. In fact, I feel it. And I'm not their species, I'm not as well adapted as them, and yet as ignorant and as blind as I am, and I truly am comparatively to them, I feel it. I feel their presence. I feel danger when they're angry. I feel positive when they're happy to see me. Does this make sense? And I can't express it, and science can't quantify it in a graph, but it's real, and you feel it, and I know it exists. I know it. And so knowing that they have that ability, you go and take on this species, you better be afraid. Can you imagine how dominant? They're big and strong and powerful and fast. And within their cooperation, they have perfect communication somehow. I don't think it's really language. I think it's feelings. I think it's, you see it in gorillas. They have feelings, they have mannerisms, they have body language they rely on. That's honest, right? There's no deception. There's no competition amongst them. They love each other. They're devoted to each other. A father and a son, a mother and a daughter, a husband or a father and his children know this feeling. You know this feeling, right? The love you have for your children. You can feel your child. Your child can come home and not even look at you. You know something's wrong. They have this ability exceptionally superior to ours. I can feel it. If they can communicate it to me, what they're communicating amongst themselves is much more powerful. And it's beautiful, it's spiritual, it's the richest way to live. And there's so much we can learn from this species. I'm a student, they are my teachers. I'm very humble in their presence, and I'm only there to learn from them. They have nothing to learn from me, nothing. They're absolute masters. You're a student, many people are students. I have a reverence for their ability, spiritually, biologically, and I have absolute reverence for their miracle. The miracle that they exist is amazing. So I hope that answers your communication question.
When we were talking yesterday, Mr. Standing, I mentioned to you that our teacher, Imam Ahmed Hassan, alayhi had spoken to us about a creation that was called the Haitan, and that these beings, if a person was to look at them, they would find them resembling monkeys to a certain degree, and the person's first impression would be that these creatures are not that intelligent. But he said that they're very advanced spiritually, and he also had mentioned, like I mentioned to you yesterday, that these beings are actually what modern science has mistaken as or has called our ancestors, the Homo erectus and the Homo habilis,
right,
and these other hominid species. Have you ever heard anything like this before? And what are your thoughts on this?
No, I haven't heard it. I feel it. I know it. I live it. It's amazing to me how a person can spiritually in depth. I call them shaman. They're all over the world. It's amazing to me how somebody so far away that doesn't know knows. What do I have to say about it? He's absolutely correct, 100%. Next question. There's nothing incorrect about anything he just said. Perhaps maybe I would take a step further into it. An ignorant person would see them as slow and, in that way. A shaman would not see that. A great spiritually in-depth person would know they're coming before they're there, would feel them immediately, because that powerful presence that they have is just something that a deeply spiritual person, and even science and biology, for God's sake, there's something being radiated that I know we can't quantify it scientifically, and I love science, I embrace science, but this is way beyond that. And it's more obvious truth. How does this man know these things? I've been to many places, talked to many people. I've been to Texas to meet shaman, and I go there and I sit down. Even I met a Texas Ranger who had written up all this stuff about Sasquatch. And they took me to Texas and they showed me, and I read it all, and I said, this man knew Sasquatch. Anything else? And they go, well, what do you have to say about it? Everything written here is exactly correct. Well, let's go study Sasquatch. No, there's no need. This man knew. Be a student of his. He's brilliant. He's amazing. He wrote this 80 years ago. He knows as much about Sasquatch as I've ever heard. I have nothing more to add to this. The man was amazing. Study him. Well, can you come do something here? No, I'm not. This is not my home. Study this man. Be a student of him. You don't need my help. I'm going home. Goodbye. And they couldn't believe it. And I'm like, well, wait, you don't need me. You already have a teacher who's great. Follow this man. Where's his son? Where's his students? Who did he mentor? Go follow them, right? So, you know, it's right. It's correct. I know the truth. A wise man sees the truth. I admire the fact that I've had to work for a decade, over a decade, decades now, to acquire the information that your teacher just knows. How the hell does he know that? I'm not jealous of it. I admire it. Maybe perhaps I should be a student. And if I was ever in the presence of that greatness, a man who has this knowledge without even having, he's earned it in a different way. This knowledge does not just come to you. You have to earn it. And the way he earned it is miraculous. It's a miracle, just like the species is.
One of the other things that he said is that the videos, because we took the video material that you had filmed and we presented it to him, and he said that they are absolutely authentic, and that these are real video of Sasquatch.
Yes.
Could you tell us, please, about those 3 clips that you had featured in your documentary, where there's close-up facial video of them? Because our audience probably has 1,000,001 questions. They want to know which one was male, which one was female. How did you feel? Which one was more aggressive? You know, why did one of them perhaps look a little bit darker, maybe like a gorilla, while another one had a different look?
Right. Well, when I have the privilege and the success to get some kind of footage from Sasquatch, I have no control over lights. As a director, anybody who knows about even cameras, photography, lighting is essential. I'm out in the wilderness, however the lights are, it's just that way. If I had nice cloud cover in daylight, then I'm going to get a beautiful rich shot. If it's direct sunlight, it's almost there's no light you can compete with direct sunlight. It's profound, it's strong, and a filmmaker does not want that. A photographer does not want direct sunlight. I don't have a choice though. Wherever the Sasquatch is, if he's in a shadow and there's direct sunlight all around him, the shot is the shot as I see it.
No, I'm not talking about the shot. I mean, like, our audience is wondering, are there different species of Sasquatch?
Right.
Or?
No, there's some differences in the way they look, and even in the videos that I get, unfortunately, a lot of times, like I get a back shot of a Sasquatch running away. That's all I can get. Or I'll get a facial shot of the head because the head peers out to look with wilderness all around it. I mean, they want to be covered in wilderness. That's their home. It's their blanket. So I get whatever I get, and I just print it. That's it. That's just the way it is. So with different lighting and different exposures and different cameras and different weather, each individual that looks the same, they do look extremely similar, will have differences that don't actually exist. What I've seen with my own eyes, the similarity is clear. They are the same body shape. They are the same height, thickness. Everything is the same. Well, at least extremely similar like you would see in human beings. But of course there are facial differences. There seems to be skin color differences slightly. I've seen some that are even old, that are gray looking, right? That have more wrinkles on the face. Young with tighter face and maybe a lighter brown, darker brown, or no, black at youth. And then they get dark as they get older, or a dark brown as they get older. And then as they get really old, they turn into like a grayish black color. So, or a grayish brown color. So, but I understand just looking at the photos, you might see discrepancies and differences, but.
No, but I mean, I guess the question is do they have differences among them as much as you would see differences in, for example, a person who's of Chinese nationality or origin versus a person who's Middle Eastern versus a person who's African versus a person, or when you come to look at species of dogs, obviously you have a Dalmatian that looks completely different than a German Shepherd, that looks completely different than a Pit Bull. Right.
Yeah, there seems to be some differences, but to me personally, once, like, I look at a Jack Russell as an example of a dog. And if I have 5 Jack Russells and they all have different colors, people look at them, like one's brown and white, one's black and white, one's got yellow and white on it. And to me, they look totally different. Even as a father, your children look totally different to you, except they have dark skin, and you take them to somebody else and you have 5 children, somebody will say to you, in ignorance, how do you tell them apart? And you smile and go, it's so blatantly obvious to me their differences. And that's how I feel. Their differences are, I can tell them apart, but the similarities are very profound too. When a Sasquatch has dark brown skin to black skin, it's a very small difference, isn't it? To me, do they tan? I don't know. Is there, there's more questions, even for myself, than there are answers. But all the Sasquatch that I have footage of, that are in the documentary, are all from the same area, the same group, the same family. So obviously the families, I mean, Sasquatch live, I have knowledge of them all the way down to Texas, up into Alaska. That's enormous. The Native Americans who lived there. Look at the Inuit compared to the Iroquois, right? So do you think the Iroquois didn't go north or Inuit didn't go south and interbreed? Of course they do. If you stay within your tribe, you'll eventually get inbreeding, which is, throughout anthropology, it's a big taboo. Don't inbreed, right? It's allowed us human beings to survive as a species. So to think that there would be a Texas Sasquatch that would migrate down into British Columbia and meet an Alaskan Sasquatch is not unlikely. And one will be bigger and smaller and darker and different colors, and they'll interbreed, and who knows what offspring they'll breed, right? So when you absolutely for certain have them as far away as Texas and as north as Alaska, there's going to be differences. There must be. Even the bears, as you go, look at the white polar bear as opposed to the California grizzly. Much different size, much different color. They can interbreed, right? So even more specifically, how about the Kodiak grizzly bears as opposed to the California grizzly bears? There is a significant difference. Swedish, here I am in Sweden, looking at the Swedish brown bears. I look at them, I go, oh, they look different, but kind of the same. So, and they can breed, they can interbreed together, grizzly bears and Swedish brown bears. So there is, and I think within a primate species that's so easily adapted to any area because they're so dominant, you're going to get variation that's much more significant. Even the Native Americans. Look at Geronimo, his face was round. And what's been profound and recently shocking to me is there's a video for a female that I filmed. She has a very round face, a very original looking nose and eyes. And I compared her to Geronimo, an indigenous person, because I'm studying Geronimo. He's a very important character in history. And I put them together and I thought, oh my God, they look so similar, profoundly similar. Look at that, look at video 4 and compare it to Geronimo. I had goosebumps, I was so shocked. I was so profoundly looking at these two similar individuals. And then I take Jake, the male that I filmed, and I remove his hair with Photoshop and take away his big sagittal crest on his head, and I look at his eyes and his nose. He looks like a female who looks like Geronimo. They look closer to the indigenous Native Americans. And when I say indigenous Native Americans, a lot of Native, even like the Apache look very different from the Cree, look very different from the Iroquois. I mean, very different. So, there's major differences between these indigenous people. So, are the Sasquatch that different looking? Yes. In fact, I think the Sasquatch look much more profoundly like the Apache and the indigenous people, the western sides and all the way down into the southern United States, than human beings. Than Caucasians and blacks. So there's a real similarity between them that leads also to another shocking truth that perhaps they interbred.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you.
Maybe
do you think that there was any interbreeding that took place between Sasquatch and humans over human history?
The stories of it are rampant and very profound. And what I've seen and witnessed myself, I've been to reserves where there are Native Americans living today in Canada. They call me because when their women ovulate, Sasquatch come to the house, males, and are banging on the house. And they're afraid because they heard stories about Sasquatch taking women. And then just in my scientific studies, I go to the zoo in Calgary. I studied the primates there with the primatologists. And I see they give gorillas human birth control pills to control the breeding. Female gorillas, they're African, they're so separate from us, it's profoundly different than us. They take human birth control pills because their cycles are identical to human beings. And we have far, far, far more in common with a Sasquatch than a gorilla. So the question is, I mean, human beings you could take chimpanzees and humans and have an offspring that grows, but when it's born, passes and doesn't die. So, but you take a horse and a donkey and you get a mule, right? These can breed, this happens. Mules are offspring. But, so can that happen with human beings and Sasquatch? Kind of a very uncomfortable question, but something that we really have to consider, and I've heard stories, many stories from people that I respect and admire, from shaman, saying yes, they take women, yes, they have bred with women, which is very shocking and offensive to many people. It's a topic I don't like to touch on very much, but when I look at Geronimo, and I look at video 4 that's in my documentary, have a look, tell me what you think. It's shocking to me, the similarities. So the answer is I don't know, and it's not a subject that I'm comfortable going into because it's it's rape, it's violation, it's stealing of a human being. You know what I mean? It's pretty scary stuff. It's pretty shocking. So,
do you think there might have been instances of consensual breeding between the two species?
I sure hope not. I really, really hope not. Even to me, it's quite offensive. But there are stories that are significant from people I admire and respect. Oral stories, the Juniqua stealing women on Vancouver Island. Those are stories that are real. Don't run out in the bush, the Juniqua will get you. You know, so even the strongest, most profound story I ever heard in Native culture was a young boy. There was a fire in his house, and his parents were killed. And this young boy, he was 10 years old, went off into the wilderness and disappeared. They just thought he ran away, upset. But his spiritual animal guide, which is, I have in Native American culture, you earn a spiritual animal. His spiritual animal was the Sasquatch, which scared the parents because it's too powerful an animal, or too powerful a guide, let's not say animals, too powerful a guide for a man to have. It scared them. But when their house burnt down, this little boy left and came back 8 years later with exceptional abilities, with knowledge and understanding. How did he survive for all that time? Really, like winters, as a young man, you can't survive. Without tremendous knowledge and use of fire and survival skills, it's extremely unlikely that a young 10-year-old boy can survive. Bears, mountain lions, you'll die. I don't know how. So the story is, and this boy confirmed it, because when he was 18, after 8 years, he went back and came back to the indigenous people and lived with them for a while, and then went back into the wilderness. And he would come back every 5-10 years just to see human beings again. He would disappear back to the wilderness, and it was accepted that he lived with the Sasquatch. He survived with the Sasquatch. And so I mean, stories like that, very profound to me, right? Very significant. And this is a boy, though, not a female. So, but the Native people calling me saying, "Can you come over here, please? They call me a Sasquatch expert, which is a term I don't like, but I do research them. And they say, you have an exceptional knowledge of Sasquatch. We respect you. Can you please help us, because it's scaring my children when the Sasquatch are banging on our house when they're ovulating, and only when they're ovulating, which is scary for a father who lives in a house where it's wilderness all the way from Canada to Alaska. There's nothing. It's just nothing but wilderness. Like his backyard is thousands and hundreds of thousands of square kilometers of nothing but wilderness. And what comes out of that wilderness, they tell me, are the Sasquatch banging on his house, banging on the windows of the girls, of his daughters. Right? Please, Todd, come and help me. What do you think? Well, I think that's pretty scary. I think you should move. And he did. He moved. Because, they get bolder and bolder, like a bear. will get bolder and bolder, and if you let it continue, it'll get bolder. You have to scare it off and make it not come back, and they're not willing to do that with Sasquatch because they're so powerful. They're such a strong, you can't scare, how do you scare off a Sasquatch? Go ahead, try to shoot one, you'll die. So that's what they know. So the response is leave, go away. And that's what he did.
You said that they live in, obviously, Canada, forest areas. They live in North America.
Right.
They live in Tibet and those mountainous regions.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that because the shaman, the Sherpers, the indigenous people that live in Tibet and China, you go and ask them and they'll tell you, I've seen a Yeti. I know they're real. I've been taught I know what to do when a Yeti comes around. This is what you do. The same way a biologist will say, well, if it's a black bear, fight back. If there's a hump and it's a grizzly bear, be a lump. We have rules. They have rules.
Have you heard of any other places that they've been, or know of any other places that they've been? Like, for example, do they exist within the Amazon jungles in South America, or is it more colder areas? Or
yeah, well, it's the science of it is biologically, as it gets colder, you get bigger. The biggest bears in the world are the polar bears in the north, right? And bears will get smaller as it gets warmer. And it's the same thing with deer. Deer are small in Texas and huge in Alberta, right? So it's just it's a law of nature. And they even have, like, I've been to Mexico, they have the Alush down there. The Mexican people were I was very attracted to them. Again, shaman, great people that were indigenous. The Mayans, the evolution of the Mayans that are there in Mexico. I met these shaman. Oh my God, they just, as soon as they walk out of the room, the power that emanates from them is so obvious to me. Another shaman, like your teacher. And they tell me about the Alush. And of course, what do? You're telling me there's a little green man like this, a quarter the size of a Sasquatch, and he goes, one smacked my wife's ass this morning. Don't tell me they're not real, they're real. Why don't you come study them? And I go, oh my God, no. Like, it's a different world. I'm alien in South America, right? I'm alien in Mexico. I don't know the tropics. It would take me another lifetime to get great at it and discover the Alush. You guys have done it. You know it. I'll just ask you and I trust you. So, of course, there's the Homo floresiensis, right? The hobbit that we absolutely know is real 10,000 years ago. And the indigenous people say they're still there. And they know. How arrogant is it to go into a place you don't know, to talk to people that are indigenous and admire them for their culture and how they thrive there, and yet disrespect them when they tell you that the Homo floresiensis is real. It's very disrespectful. That's what's created this modern people, technological people, not believing the species exists. The best trackers in the world are the indigenous Native Americans. They know it's real. Sasquatch is not a term for some elusive thing. It's bear, deer, Bigfoot. Bear, deer, Sasquatch. They're a real species. They'll tell you how to interact with them, right? And every Native American culture has this reverence for them. Sasquatch means wild master of the wilderness. Master, teacher, right? Up above you. And Native Americans are exceptional and amazing. They're saying Sasquatch is the master of the wilderness. Wilderness people. And they don't think themselves wilderness people. They think the Sasquatch are. The Native Americans would tell you, I have fire, I have technology. The horses came and I rode it. A Sasquatch won't get on a horse. Sasquatch is not going to start a fire, pick up a spear. They don't need it. It's technology. They fear it. Why do they fear it? Goes back to the story, right? So, and I hear it all through. I hear it in Russia. All through that territory. I'm surprised there's not more stories here in Sweden. Why not? I don't know. They sure should exist here. I would think the professor that I work with, one of my mentors, Jeff Meldrum, has a theory that where there are black bears, there are likely Sasquatch. Well, there are grizzly bears here in Sweden. Shouldn't there be Sasquatch? I don't know. But the first thing I want to do, talk to the indigenous people. Because what they tell me, I will humbly respect and not believe. I know that they're telling the truth. You can feel it, can't you? When how could you have a respect for a culture and a person? A man walks in the room and you feel this profound energy, and then he tells you the Alush are real, and you go, you're crazy. The little green people up there, you're nuts. It almost makes me angry now. As a tracker, as an indigenous person, After spending thousands and thousands of days in the wilderness, I know the species is real. When you come to me and tell, and the Native American people know it's real. Now my son and my people, my culture, everybody within my circle know this species is real, my wife, my friends. To say, because I'm an honest man and I tell the truth, no matter what, I tell the truth. To say that I'm lying and delusional, when I'm an expert, when I go out in the wilderness and I survive, when other people die, I'm an expert and I know. So why don't you shut up and listen to somebody who knows? The Native Americans know that they exist, you know? The people in Floral, where Homo florenziensis is, PhDs that don't know anything. It makes me angry sometimes. How could they be so omnipotent? What's the matter with you? Shut up and listen to those who know. I'll listen to a PhD when a doctor has something to say to me, when he tells me to take this pill and it makes me better and it works. And I respect him. He's been to school. I respect science. Science is a culture, you know, of truth. To go to an indigenous person, you know, who survives, who teach you about medicine, teach you how to watch it. Don't go over that way. Why? There's a snake nest, you twit. See those little holes in the ground? You'll be killed, right? This expert knows they exist, and we don't accept it. Technologically advanced people, scientists, know they don't exist. So, and I find it offensive, and it makes me angry that those people will call me a liar and say I'm not, say I should be medicated. It's very offensive, and I think the Muslim people can understand that very well when it comes to media and science and the arrogance that they project sometimes. It's even towards spirituality. It's offensive to me. I am offended by the way they are so arrogant, and they can't see the light. And people like your teacher and your shaman can. They won't listen, right? That man should have a PhD in spirituality, shouldn't he? Right? Right? And it's offensive to me that he doesn't get one. It's offensive to me that he's not teaching seminars. He's not in a university like a professor being admired, because he has so much more greatness to teach that's historically very significant, and it's not accepted in it. I'm offended by that. And I make no apologies for it. It's offensive. And I know this because in the beginning, I was the offensive one. I went to the First Native Nations people, and I smiled and go, "Oh, so you think there was a Sasquatch here this morning?" And I smiled. What an I was, right? I was that guy. So I'm not disrespecting the scientists in the community, but I'm trying to help them understand. These people know. They know how to hunt, they know how to track. You don't. The groups that I am able to study, the two main groups I study now, there have been dozens that I've tried to go and study. Montana, Washington, different places in British Columbia. They didn't accept me. They were adversarial towards me for years. So I had to abandon those research sites. The reason I'm having success where I am is because these groups have accepted me. However, the Nordic group in Alberta that I study, I've never really tried to film them. I'm really just out there as a student learning. I have incredible video. Do I think I can get better than that? Well, for years I thought I couldn't. I mean, and the great video that I have is really not accepted as real footage at all. So again, I was quite offended, right? And I didn't feel the need to go get more footage. And what I had to do to get that footage was I had to do something. I had to use a piece of technology, and I had to deceive the Sasquatch to get those pieces of footage. So to go do that again would be damaging to me. And literally what I did was, the technology I used was neoprene. Those hip waders that are made out of neoprene gave me the ability to walk in creeks against the current for kilometers and kilometers. And no animal can do that. A deer can't do that. They go walk. You walk in a creek, and the water flows against your flesh. It literally strips the heat off of you, and it will kill you. It'll freeze you. You will die. Even a deer, it gets on its legs, and the water continuously. I'll sleep in the creek with this neoprene hip waders. That's what I did. I spent days. The natives, the Indians, called me a shaman and said, "You're a creek walker," and I was. I would walk in the creek. You don't leave scent in the creek. You don't make sounds that are perceivable in the creek when you're moving appropriately. And I moved into Sasquatch habitat by sneaking up through these creeks, being a creek walker. But when I would get that success, when I would get that footage, it would damage if I was at 5 steps into a relationship with them, I would go back 2 steps. They would be angry at me, they would be hostile towards me. I would feel that I deceived them and it damaged my relationship with them. So I don't want to get footage like that again. There is another way, through positivity, through cooperation, and it's much longer. It takes more time to build that relationship. Primatologists say it takes 8 years before they can go and successfully go into a gorilla troop where they've been accepted. 8 years. With all the knowledge we have about gorillas today, it still takes that length of time. It seems to be about the same with Sasquatch. The Nordic group are accepting me very quickly, which has just made my heart full of joy. I get better and better every year. That footage that I have, I can do better. I will get better. This isn't the 1967 Patterson footage from California. That's it, that's all, folks. Never gonna get another piece of footage. No. The opposite. I am growing, I'm evolving, this student is becoming more advanced every year. My teachers I'm building this relationship. I'm very excited about this year. I left my research sites last year with the most success I've ever had. Not with footage. And perhaps people will be like, well, if you're not getting footage, it's not worth it. Well, that's not what it's about, though. It's about getting accepted into the group. It's about building a new relationship with them. And that is entirely my goal. The day they were growling at me, it's quite a long story, but they were, sometimes a father will yell at his child and be angry with him because he's trying to teach him something that's very important. We all do it. I yell at my son if he's going to go across the street and he doesn't look both ways. I yell at him. It makes me angry. You don't risk your life. You take your head out of your ass and you pay attention when you cross the road. And he listens. That's what the Sasquatch did to me that day. They were teaching me a lesson. It's almost impossible for me to explain. It's a very, very long, deep story. But they needed to teach me a lesson that I needed to learn. And I'm very grateful for that lesson. Even though it looks like it's a horrible experience, with them growling at me and all the stuff that transpired, it was terrifying, but it was a lesson that I needed to learn, and they taught it to me, and I'm very grateful for it. And that's all I do, is learn lessons from them. That's all I go out there. Beyond the story that I told you about technology and Sasquatch not accepting it, the other thing that I do is I am a student of theirs. I have nothing to teach them. I don't know what could I teach them? They know the wilderness, they know it. They've been there for tens of thousands of years, right? So I have absolutely nothing that I could ever know to teach them. I'm just a student of theirs. As a human being, I'm asking them for help. I think this planet's in trouble. I think they can really do something significant. I think they have an obligation to help us. They're being damaged. They lose land. Their forest is being destroyed. They're being ignored. They need to do something. And I think that's maybe even why the new generation that's growing up, that I'm literally starting a relationship with a Sasquatch who had a 12-inch track, who's now a 17-inch track. He's grown up with me. He's seen me. He's tested me. He knows about my spirituality. He knows that I won't harm him. I've had the opportunity. He's seen me draw a gun and kill things. And he's seen when he comes around, I go to draw the gun, and as soon as I know it's a Sasquatch, I put the gun away and I won't touch it. And he knows that. And he's like, this guy gets it, right? He draws a gun when a mountain lion comes around to defend himself only. And he will use that as a last resort to defend himself. And I have a right to defend myself. When a Sasquatch comes around, I can do nothing to defend myself. If that Sasquatch, if I took a gun and drew it at a Sasquatch and pointed at him, I would die. I would die so fast before I could pull that trigger. It's not him to worry about. It's his brother and his father and his uncle and maybe his mother who's right there watching me from another angle who could take me out that fast. I'm fragile, and when they come around and dominate me, they have to be very gentle with me because they can just break me. You can imagine gorillas play fighting with each other. You can't do that with a human being. And a Sasquatch, as scary as this is probably, to scientists, this might be offensive, and to people that know how strong primates and gorillas are. Understanding this fact, it's very clear to me the Sasquatch are over twice the size of a gorilla and clearly over twice as strong. That better scare you. Twice as fast. Be afraid. So much more intelligent in the wilderness. Gorillas aren't trackers. Gorillas are, and chimpanzees, even chimpanzees, we're all amazed when they strategically will do something to catch a monkey and eat it. They do that rarely. The Sasquatch not just hunters, they're trackers. Do you know how intelligent you have to be to track? They can track you. There are natives that could track you through rocks. How do they do that? The Sasquatch are much better at it. I've seen Native Americans track in a way that I've learned to do. It's actually called heart tracking. I'll tell you about it. It's where you use your left hand. Your teacher will know about this. You feel the energy comes from your left side. Hair grows more on my left side because that's my heart side. That's where the power is, right? Because I feel things from my heart. When I use my left hand and I feel the energy of the earth, I can follow the energy. You'll see the old trackers doing that. How is he following a man on the rocks? The same way a dog can smell it. A human being can feel the energy. I call it heart tracking. And I look at the old videos and the old photographs of natives, and you'll see them, they'll be standing like this, that left hand. And if you see them tracking, they'll use their left hand. They're heart tracking. They're feeling the energy from their heart. And the Sasquatch can do that. I've seen a Sasquatch track. I've seen a Sasquatch following me going like this. I went over there, and he moves in that direction with his left hand. I've witnessed this. So they don't just have a connection spiritually. They're intelligent. They're tracking about it. They hear a squirrel chirping. They go, that squirrel's saying there's a mountain lion over there, right? They see the deer move in a certain way, and they go, oh my God, there's wolves down there. Because the deer move this way. Oh, it's a big bear. Look at the deer, the way they move, right? So they react to their environment. They'll move based on the wind. They know, oh, the sun's coming up, it's a sunny day, the wind's going to shift and go this way. Oh, it's cloudy, the wind's going to go that way. So when you live in the wilderness, you live and die based on the wind gauge, where things can smell you and how you move. This is how they live. This is first nature to them. We pick up a phone and get information from Google. They wake up and look at the stars or in the sky and take a deep breath and realize they feel the humidity going up and knowing it's going to rain, right? This is their life. And it's brilliant and beautiful and magnificent. So just a highly intelligent species they are my teachers. They're my ultimate teachers. Spiritually, as a wilderness expert, I admire them. And I've heard it from even Les Stroud on Survivor Man. You know, if the Sasquatch are real, at one point he says, they live out here in this environment, my kind of guy, right? And they are. They're totally amazing and fantastic at everything they do. We have so much to learn from them.
So, do you ever think that there will come a point where the Sasquatch decide it's time now to come forth and make open contact?
I try to think like I'm a Sasquatch. I try to think like how they would perceive things. Technology and men are everywhere. They see trucks, they see vehicles. I can go out into the most remote areas and I hear airplanes going over.
But like if man decides to encroach too much upon their territory,
there's going to be a limit, absolutely. And I think that's what I'm seeing with structures. These structures that I've shown in my documentary, those aren't made for Sasquatch. Those are, can you imagine a bulldozer, a D9? You know how big a D9 is? And it goes, ah! You're in the most serene, quiet, beautiful place you could ever imagine. And a D9 comes through there with a screaming diesel poison engine, with a big blade on the front of it, and it's destroying your land. Can you imagine how that feels? That's chainsaws. Destroying your home, your land. And they're reacting to it. They're trying to communicate, and we're so blind. We're so blind, I don't think the Sasquatch realize how blind we are. The Sasquatch are like, I just made tree breaks on a structure. Right off the road. It's obvious. And people won't even give it a second look. They'll go, oh, trees just fell naturally in a triangle situation and flipped upside down and were twisted and shoved in. People will actually do that and go, oh, it just looks natural to me. Jeff Meldrum did it in the documentary. 3 of the trees that were clearly broken over, clearly busted in a direction. He was like, well, that could happen naturally. There's no other trees that did that. Like if something, there'd be 80 or thousands of trees. If the wind or a tornado, why are these like that? All triangulated. Fortunately, the Sasquatch know how stupid we are. Maybe that's not a good term, I don't want to offend people. Know how ignorant we are. And they take a tree and shove it upside down. And then they take another one and shove it right into the structure. Do you think that could happen naturally? And then Jeff Meldrum looks at it and goes, yeah, that's not natural. I can't explain these 2 trees. And now the discussion begins, right? But the point is they're communicating with us. They make the breaks that I show people. They leave tracks on purpose. They step on the ground and say, look at my tracks. Have a look. They don't have to leave tracks. They're the best trackers in the world. They could bounce from tree to tree and walk on logs. If the best trackers in the world want to disappear, They're gone. And many people, including Survivor Men, have mentioned that. You make a mistake and you upset these guys, they will disappear and you will never hear from them again. So, but there's a point where we're building dams and stopping the salmon from going up into their territory. Their families can't eat now. We're destroying hunting grounds. We're removing land from them. There's got to be a breaking point. There's got to, because loss of habitat equals loss of life. Look what's happened in the Middle East, right? Go try to take somebody's land, you lose, you die, you wither away. There was millions of people there before surviving on the lands. You steal their lands away. Now there can only be hundreds of thousands. It's simple math. It's simple ecology and biology. You don't take a person's land away. They require it for survival. And that's happening profoundly. So, you know, I don't mean to push things on them, but sometimes my intent is, for God's sake, we need your help. And you're a part of this land. You live here. This is your home. And we need your help. And you have to be, even that's what I'll say to them sometimes. You have to be brave. You have to come out. You have to teach me. You have to teach all of us.
So was this particular fear of yours that maybe they would become wiped out by humanity that caused you to decide that you wanted to file a lawsuit against Canada and against the United States?
Right. In the beginning, I fought for species protection and recognition, and I still do. But you know, even there's a part of me, and there's lots of people that know Sasquatch exist that think that showing their existence would possibly damage them. People say, well, they might be put in zoos, right? They might be killed and studied and harvested and even hunted. A hunting license for a Sasquatch. But that is not realistic whatsoever. Gorillas and chimpanzees are right on the verge of being accepted as a sentient species and it being immoral to put them in zoos. And they're very close to that. With the Sasquatch, it'll be a no-brainer. They clearly have intelligence. They're clearly self-aware. They will never be put in zoos. They're hominids. Like the evolution of my understanding of the species has gone way beyond primates. They're clearly hominids. They clearly have culture. They're clearly self-aware. They clearly have spirituality. So, and the evidence that I have of that is so immensely profound, and so overwhelming that. So
when you say hominids, you mean that they are
people.
People. Homo erectus,
Homo americanus.
Yeah.
Is what I call the Sasquatch. That's my scientific term for them. There's lots of other people, but to me, they're the original indigenous primate species or Homo species that have survived in North America. We're not. If you take me and strip me naked, a wilderness expert, throw me in the bush, I'm dead in a month. Doesn't matter what time of year, unless I use technology. Then you strip them naked, they are naked, they don't have anything, and you throw them in any harsh environment, they'll thrive. They'll rise up like the cream always rises to the top. They'll be the apex species. Come back in 20 years, they'll be fat, having a great life, loving the wilderness. Wherever you throw them. Russia, China, the forests of Iran, put them there. Guaranteed they'll thrive.
You've mentioned that there's been PhDs that worked with you. There's police officers that know that they exist. You've mentioned many different areas of specialty. I know that there's been people in the past who were like linguists who try to specialize in understanding language of the dolphins or chimpanzees. Has there ever been any work in this regard with linguists in terms of the Sasquatch?
Not to my knowledge. Again, it'd be like you know, a squirrel trying to study me. I'm a little above a squirrel, right? My intelligence is above a squirrel. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I am their student. I'm a wilderness expert.
So you believe that the Sasquatch are actually more intelligent than human beings?
No, definitely not. They're definitely more advanced in the wilderness than we are, organically. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Like they've evolved and they're continuing to evolve. They get better at tracking, at surviving. They learn new things and they teach. That's so important. Primates, intelligent primates will teach other primates. And teaching, like hunters will go after an old deer because he's experienced how to survive and he's become exceptional. Through experience, not through teaching. So But a Sasquatch will learn through teaching, will learn from thousands of years of experience, hundreds of thousands of years maybe, of experience of being on that land and living there in perfect equilibrium, not consuming like we do. You know what I mean? Like we're almost more like a virus, to be honest. We go and we will manipulate the land and we'll change it to suit our needs, to milk and suck every bit of life out of the land till there's nothing left, and then go on to the next piece of land. We do that. And they don't. They'll stay in the same place. They'll live in harmony. They have small numbers. They're not interested in growing like a virus because they live in equilibrium. They live by the natural laws, which we try not to do, right? And
so we have the average human being. He lives to about maybe in his 70s. What about the average Sasquatch?
Yeah, I think their teeth go rotten. I think they don't live past 50. I've seen it. I also, one of the worst things is I've seen the group that I talked about that was on the reserve that I studied. I've seen the male die too young, and what seems to be he was damaged by logging that came through on the backside of the reserve. It damaged all the wilderness and moved off the elk. And I think that there was a small troop of Sasquatch that shrunk and shrunk and shrunk, and now it's gone because human beings have eliminated their ability to survive by taking land, by logging and removing oil from the land and doing this damage. And it really was very hurtful to me. It made me angry. It made me ashamed because the biologists can't recognize that the Sasquatch were there. And it's quite clear to me that this group is gone. The male died. The female couldn't survive. And and the children died. And it was something that very clearly happened to me. I saw them get really skinny. I saw them get weak. And then they were just gone 1 year. And there was no sign of them. And I went hiking past the reserve in the backcountry, and then I saw all the logging all the way through that I didn't even know was there. It came over top of a mountain, and I got really upset because I saw why they weren't there anymore. I saw that there wasn't elk anymore there, that the deer populations had gone, that all the berries that they'd been surviving off of for probably 100 generations were wiped out from the logging, right? Gone. That's how they survived. They can't reach the lakes anymore where they get the fish from because they're blocked. The logging trucks are there, all those people, and they won't go there. They'll stay away. They fear that stuff, the insanity of it, right? So, it's damaging and it's painful and it's happening. You have to, if they're real, and I know they are, we're taking their home away, and they're so peaceful, they just accept it. And perhaps they do stand up for a time, but eventually they accept the fact that these insane people that are like a virus and consuming, just stay away from them, and they move back into the wilderness. And loss of habitat equals loss of life. It's a fact that everybody knows exists, and we're taking habitat away from them, and it's likely their populations are dwindling. I don't care what anybody says. These are facts. So many species in North America are gone forever. There was a short-nosed grizzly bear. There were different kinds of ungulates that were amazing. They're all gone. They're wiped out forever. The bison, which are a beautiful, deeply spiritual animal to the Native Americans, they were basically wiped out. They don't really, they're being reintroduced, but there were 400 million bison roaming across North America. Do you know how much food that is? You know how much abundance that is? They're gone. But there's, now there's maybe tens of thousands. We've wiped them down to thousands. Thousands from 400 million bison only 150 years ago. Do you know many of them bison, how huge they are? 400 million. They're gone now. They're wiped out in 150 years. It breaks my heart to think about that. All the wolves and the short-nosed grizzlies that would survive off of those animals are gone. Thousands of species have been wiped out. This land used to be milk and honey. Can you imagine how many Sasquatch are gone? And they didn't fight. They just peaceably disappeared into the harsher environments and stayed away from the insanity. Can you imagine how the Sasquatch felt when people were coming in on trains and just shooting bison by the hundreds? Look at these stupid animals. I love bison. They are so beautiful. They are spiritually brilliant and magnificent. That's where I learned to track, was in a place near my home called Elk Island Park, is where the bison were saved. That's where bison are being shipped back out into the world, into Montana and Yellowstone National Park, from where they were last kept. And when I see these beautiful creatures, oh wow, they have serenity, they're calm, they have abundance, they're beautiful. To think people eliminated hundreds of millions, you know how many hundreds of millions? Hundreds of millions of them were eliminated exterminated, murdered. No wonder the Sasquatch. They saw this. They know this. They talk about this. They tell their children about this. They tell them about how there were 800 million elk, 750 million deer. God, as soon as these white people came, as soon as technology really came and took away the Native Americans, billions of species were eradicated in 100 years. They'll say, the Sasquatch will say, we've been here for thousands of years. It was so brilliant and abundant. It's all gone since this technology came. Now ask me why they fear technology. Can you imagine how the story is? Most Sasquatch have never seen a bison now. Never seen one. They don't exist in the wild. They're trying to reintroduce them, but and go see a bison. If you can see one in a zoo, that's not the same. I see them in the wild. I see them in Elk Island Park, which is in Alberta, which is where I study the Sasquatch. They are the First Nations people, the Native Americans, revered them because they're so beautiful. They're so majestic. They're magnificent creatures, brilliantly designed by God. And we eradicated them like they were a virus when we're the virus. So it's the more I study about the way things have changed and what we've done, the more I can clearly, vividly understand how the Sasquatch are terrified of technology. Are you starting to see it now?
Would you say that the Sasquatch is become an endangered species?
No, I don't think they're endangered. I think that in the environments they survive within, they do very well. But, there's probably thousands of them. I think there's more than I even know, to be honest. When I really go out there and I see the terrain, there's so much wilderness. And, that's not good enough for me. Some people are like, well, they do have a lot and they have their abundance. It's going to be gone. Look at Europe. Can't buy land here anymore, or in a lot of places in Germany. I talk to a lot of Europeans. You inherit land now. You don't get it. In England, in Ireland, for generations they haven't had land. The Irish are all over the world because they can't get land. They've gone where the land. It's going to run out. It's going to happen, right? And there's got to be we have to stop. There's got to be a limit. And the Sasquatch have to do something too. So, man, I tell you, I've been face to face. I've seen a Sasquatch, 100 yards away from me, maybe 8 layers of trees back, and I know he's there. And you know what I tell him? I say, please help. I do. I sit down with my heart and I say, I know it's scary. I know you're afraid of me. I know you see the insanity, but please help. You have to be brave. Come out. Take the apple out of my hand. Come give me a berry. Let's have a discussion because I need your help. My people need you. This beautiful planet and that wilderness that you love needs you. You can make a difference. And they feel that. And they go, you know what? This guy's got something. This guy is calling to me. And they go back and they think about it because they're so patient. They're so calm. They'll never do anything in the spur of the moment. They like to think about things. This is what the old military sergeants and generals would say about the Native Americans. That's why they're so great. That's why they're so hard to find, because they're so patient. We're not patient like that. A regiment will sit there and run out of food before the native will even come out. In 4 days, we're out of food. We're crapping and drinking water that we've crapped in and dying in our own biology. And the native is just sitting there chilling out, not even eating for 4 days, right? And the natives aren't as patient as the Sasquatch are. So over the winter, I try to have a good, profound interactions with them in the fall because I know in the winter they're thinking about me. I feel it. They're considering what they're going to do and how they're going to take the next step, and they're going to teach me that. They're trying to find a new way to communicate with me, and where should we go? Like wise shaman. That's what they do. And I've seen the old Sasquatch talk about wise and powerful. There's a gray Sasquatch that comes around. He's a shaman. He is deep. The big dominant male of the group is very aggressive and very defensive. When he comes around, I leave because he's just protecting his family. And he's old school. He loves his family. He doesn't trust people. He sees how crazy we are. He sees our guns. And he doesn't want to risk his family. So he doesn't tolerate me. But when the old shaman comes around or the young males come around, they have fun with me. there's an energy. I had an encounter, probably the most significant encounter I ever had with a Sasquatch was when I was up in Radium, and the gray Sasquatch just came over and sat down about 200 yards away from me, and he picked up some berries and he moved a little closer, and I just let it happen. It was amazing. He kept coming closer. I could feel the wisdom in him. I could feel this profound energy. And I remember he sort of laid back too, and then he went over and he looked at me like this. And he looked really positive. He's huge, but he's gray, and he's old. His legs look slim. His arms look slim, like an old man gets, right? And he looked over at me and he just went like this, and he stayed there for like 20 minutes. And you know what I thought? I finally broke down and said, I have to reach for my camera. And as soon as I did that, he was gone. As soon as I looked over and I was having this moment with him, and I'm almost in tears, like the emotion is very overwhelming. I could feel his energy, I could feel his positivity. And I was in that moment too. That's why he came around. I forgot about Sasquatch. I was just loving the trees and the wilderness, the wind. And he just came around and he got closer and closer. And I went like this. I remember going, I could have filmed this, like I've never seen it. And as soon as I felt that energy, I could see a brow go like this on him. And he turned away from me and his brow went like that. And then I reached over for my camera. It took about 5 seconds, then I turned around and he was gone. And I thought, what did I just do? Why did I need to do that? And I'm terribly regretful of that moment. I don't know what could have happened that day, that week, that month, that time I spent there. I lost it all in the moment. What do we do in the future? What's the answer? I don't know. Should I get the damn footage? Should I try to prove it to people? Or should I live in the moment and enjoy myself? Can you imagine how I felt? Just look at his eyes blinking. I felt so much. I felt like a heartbeat. I felt him breathing. I felt his huge lungs. I saw him breathe once, take a breath, like the wind sort of picked up and gusted up. The warmth of the pine trees made this beautiful scent come up the mountain, and I saw his nose flare, and I saw him take a breath of that beautiful pine-scented air and go, like a horse almost, you know? Take this enormous breath with these huge lungs, and I could just feel the patience and the calm in him, and I was just in Zen, like I'd never felt in my whole life. I've never felt since. And knowing that I destroyed that moment, what do? See, I have so much to learn. Do you see? I have so much to learn. I'm such a student. And anyways, this interaction, maybe he'll do that again someday. Young ones do that. They come around like that. They're far more, they're like young boys, right? Inquisitive, interested. They peck at me. They try to get responses out of me. They have fun with me. He wasn't doing that. He was just being wise and beautiful and enjoying the moment. And, you know, so I'm such a, like call me a Sasquatch expert when I'm so humble towards them. When I made that mistake, that's all I do is make mistakes and learn from them. That's all I do is learn from them. I had nothing to teach that Sasquatch. I've never seen in my whole life ever a creature, a living being that was more at peace and serenity than that Sasquatch. When he laid down on the ground, he absorbed it. He put his hand out, I remember, he touched the earth, and he was just, you know, I heard him take that breath, it was loud. It was, in that breath was love and passion, you know? I've never seen an elk do that. An elk love the land and drink the water. I've seen an elk go down to the water, starving, thirsty, and suck the water out of the river with love, but it was not like that. This was serenity. He had no fear. He wasn't afraid of anything, calm, right? It's just, and I have so many experiences like that. Ask me why I'm so passionate now, right? Ask me why this miracle is so important to me. Five times at least since 2006, 5 times. People have broken into my house, stole all my computers, stole all my hard drives. They don't even try to take anything else. It's clear they just wanted my stuff. They have my original footage. What am I going to do about it? I'm going to leave my house sometimes.
But that's a very important question, though. Who do you think is behind that? Do you think it's just normal people or haters, or do you think that maybe it's some sort of government cover?
There are powerful people that do this. The last time it happened, I called the police, and I was very upset. They stole my DNA. I went on my radio. I had a show with Dr. Meldrum called Bigfoot North. The most popular internet radio show ever on the biggest network. It is called America Online. anyways, the number one internet radio company. I was the number one show, and on that show I revealed that I have DNA. I didn't have the money to have it tested. A full genome analysis of my DNA cost $10,000. So I was trying to generate the money for it. So I talked about it. Jeff Meldrum saw it. It was actually, I had a piece of skin with a bit of flesh on it with hairs. It's incredible. He looked at it with a microscope. He said, that's a Sasquatch hair. They have the morphology of Sasquatch hairs known to science, known to Jeff Meldrum. So he looks at this and he goes, my God, somebody's got to analyze this. You have flesh. Yeah, I do. Well, a week later, somebody broke into my house, stole all the DNA, stole all the scat that I had, took all my computers, stole all my hard drives, took my cameras. It takes nothing to do that. I have a lock on my door. You know, the way it was done was so, when the police came and looked, the person who went into my house was a professional. They were an expert, probably a cat burglar, you know? So, you know, I'll tell you the truth, over a decade, I've had many people come to me and say, let's just go hunt and kill one. I'm a hunter. I've met hunters that are very rich that say, I want to kill a Sasquatch, take me out. I'll give you $2 million. I'll give you millions. Let's go kill one right now. Whatever it takes, helicopters, I have nothing. I have unlimited budget. And I say, no, no way, I can't do it, won't do it, refuse. Maybe it's those people, right? They've pushed me, they've pushed me in ways that were very derogatory, they've damaged me, they've taken money out of my account. One guy called me and said, I'll bury you if you don't do this for me. I'm gonna give you lots of money or I'm gonna bury you. What's it gonna be? And I said, no. And he said, okay, I'm draining your account. You have no money right now. I go, I had like $10,000 in my account. I went and looked at my HSBC account. It was gone. I went and asked the bank, well, you withdrew it. No, I didn't. Where's my money? I have to pay rent. I need to eat. I saved that up. It took me a year to save $10,000. Sorry, it's gone. Too bad. You think that there are people in power that can't do that to me? Just like that. It just takes money, right? It just takes money as power. People have been doing that to me for a long time. I've been left alone for the last 3 or 4 years, I think. That's the last time my stuff was stolen, about 3 years ago. But, you know, they have my footage. They have original footage. So I didn't have that anymore.
You mentioned something to me last night. You said that, yes, the government's aware of Sasquatch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I'm mentored by a colonel from Washington State who gives me equipment, who tells me the procedure when they see a Sasquatch. They have helicopters, they have thermal, and he says, these are the things you look for, because they saw my thermal images of Sasquatch, which is in the documentary. Those are real thermal images of a Sasquatch. Be amazed. That Sasquatch is in a tree, 20 meters up a tree with no branches, holding himself up with one arm, looking at me like this. And he checks his arm. I think he hurt himself. I think he cut his arm on something. He's looking at his arm. And then he goes, you can't, no man can do that. Something bipedal. I mean, it's not a bear. Bears don't go up a tree and bend. This Sasquatch is looking at itself like that. But that thermal image, that's when he contacted me. He said, that's a Sasquatch. And I go, well, how do you know? He goes, and he explains to me, because he's a thermal expert. He tells me that in Washington State, we see them all the time. What happens is, thermally, when you see something moving through dense wilderness at high speeds, and it's moving away from the roads, away from society, we just abort mission because it's a Sasquatch. And I went, just like that? He goes, yeah, it's a Sasquatch. He goes, we also look for other things like clothing. If you're wearing shoes, it'll show up thermally, right? Because you'll have colder spots as opposed to a wristwatch. A human always has something on it, right? Humans don't run naked at high speeds through the wilderness into harsh territory, right? So when you have these three factors, it's naked, it's moving at high velocity, and it's moving away from roads, away from civilization, it's a Sasquatch abort mission. That's their procedure. I talked to helicopter pilots many times. Oh, we got thermal here, we got somebody that's crossing the border from Washington to Canada, right? They don't want that. So they monitor the border with thermal Apache helicopters, and they know exactly how to respond when there's a Sasquatch. There's a Sasquatch Atlas. It was written back in the 70s for the military. It's become public. They have, for the Army Corps of Engineers, there's a write-up that's public now about a Sasquatch and what Sasquatch do. And you know what? It's right. It says what to do when a Sasquatch is around, what they do, how they move. It's right. Whoever wrote that had knowledge of Sasquatch. This was written for the military in the United States.
Did he mention why the government's keeping it a secret?
Yes, I've had it mentioned and discussed with me a few times. Basically, it was explained to me that compared to in World War II, when they discovered bats have radar. Radar in World War II, fortunately for military operations, the Germans discovered radar and both sides discovered it equally, so they used it against each other. But if the United States, just as an example, or Germany or any country, if they could have annihilated every bat in the world and kept radar for themselves, they would have had a significant military advantage. Everybody who knows about radar is going to agree immediately, right? Radar was enormous. You could see airplanes coming. It gave you a huge advantage. So from a military perspective, he said to me, Sasquatch have an ability that's comparable to radar. And keeping them a secret gives us a significant advantage that we don't want to give up. What that advantage is, he doesn't know. What that advantage is, I can see it on many levels. Could it be guerrilla warfare, the way they move, the way they're so stealthy? Could it be their genetics? Could it be their abilities to communicate over great distances? Could it be their infrasound that they project so strongly? Infrasound is a known thing that gorillas do. I've been hit from infrasound with Sasquatch and gorillas. Primatologists know about infrasound. Gorillas will knock you out with it. So is it that they have exceptional infrasound capabilities? The truth is I don't really know, but they do. And for them to have this information, it's very clear to me they have a body. They have living individuals. They've done tests on them for real. I mean, it's very clear to me they have this information. And why would they share it if they don't have to? Why would they have shared bats and radar if they didn't have to, right? Right. So that's a truth that we have to accept. I think the Patterson footage is the best footage in history because it's substantiated by the tracks. They cast tracks. I've never gotten a piece of footage. My research is done in the Rocky Mountains. It's rock, 99% rock everywhere. Tracks are extremely rare. And that female Sasquatch in the Patterson film walked on soft substrate that left really good tracks that showed the mid-tarsal joint, the anatomy of the foot. So in my opinion, the Patterson footage from 1967 is the best ever because it's substantiated with physical evidence. I've never been able to get a hair sample attached to a video, unfortunately. Is my footage clearer? Even the Patterson, you can see her walking. She has damage in her muscle. The reason she's not running is I think her quad is blown. A surgeon looked at it and said, you see the way that her leg is bulging, that muscle? That's because that's a torn quadricep. I'm a surgeon and I do these surgeries for a living. That's what a torn quad looks like on a bipedal human being. I think her quad was injured, that's why she didn't run away. She couldn't run, her quad was blown. So even though I have many videos, and I will get more videos, that's the difference between me and the Patterson footage is, I have 8, there'll be 9, 10, 11, I'll just keep going, it'll never stop until my son takes over.
Well, out of all the footage out there besides the Patterson footage, is there anybody else that ranks up there besides
I don't think so. I think I'm maybe number 2, and this is just my opinion, no disrespect to anybody. I think there are people out there, rephrase, I know there are people out there that likely have better footage than me and don't want to show it. They think that showing that Sasquatch is real will kill them and eradicate the species. They might be right, but I disagree because I believe in the truth, right? They want to hide the Sasquatch, and I want to expose the truth. These are my colleagues that I work with, that I talk to and I collaborate with. Brilliant men, or at least I should rephrase, one brilliant man. And he says he has incredible, amazing footage. You know, who's to say who's out there? How many people have fantastic footage and love the Sasquatch, have a better relationship with them, know more about the Sasquatch than I do? It just didn't go public.
You will see footage of yourself going to a site with us where there was an alleged Sasquatch encounter.
In Sweden, I'll be doing what I love to do. Yes, I'm very excited.
Todd, what happened today?
This morning, I went out with my my German friends, and we went walking around in the oldest area of Sweden, where the palaces and just an old part of town, where also where the Nobel Prize Museum is. And I went into the Nobel Prize Museum, and I felt really inspired by a conversation I had with you, and about the fact that the Sasquatch really are people, and who have rights. And the discovery process is about discovering a new race of people, I guess, would you say? Just a new people, period. I don't like using the word race so much, perhaps. But I've always been, I've always known and I adhere to the philosophy of, if you do nothing, you get nothing. And I'm always trying to be bold and challenge things as best I can. And again, being inspired by all the great men that I've seen in that Nobel Museum, listening to their struggle about how they weren't recognized, they were called liars, they were called deceitful, the way I am in a lot of ways. And it's almost a cliche. So I went to the curators of the museum and I said, you know, you don't have a discovery, like a Nobel Prize for a discovery process of like a new species, do you? They go, well, not really. And I, what about a new people? Again, as we discussed yesterday. And I said, well, that would fall into the category of a Nobel Peace Prize. And I said, well, and I showed them my videos and told them who I was. And I said, you see this people here, if I took somebody out and showed them these people, what would happen? They go, well, we have a group of people that go out and assess for Nobel Prizes. Would you be willing to take them out and show them these people? And I said, well, we call them Sasquatch. And I said, that's what I do. I take people out. I'm a tracker. I'm an Indigenous person from Canada who takes people out and shows them this Indigenous people. We live interact with them and I witness them. And she said, you're really willing to do that? And I said, absolutely, that's what I do. Don't take my word for it. Come out with me and I will show you a Sasquatch. And she said, well, let me go talk to this lady over here. It just so happens that we have Dr. So-and-so, I can't remember her name, and she'll be interested to talk to you. She came over and said the same thing. You'll really show us. Like, we'll really go out with you and you'll really show us. You're willing to do this. And I said, yes. So I wrote down my documentary that's on Netflix that they'll watch, and I challenged them. I gave them my number and my address and my phone number, and I challenged them to come out with me. And she said, 5 people are okay. And I said, yeah. And she says, they'll be PhDs. And I said, in fact, in the documentary, you'll see I've already taken out PhDs, and you can call them as a reference. And she said, that's very significant to us. And I said, yes, look at the documentary, call me, I'll give you the PhD's number. He actually eyewitnessed a Sasquatch, and the same process would apply to you and your people. And she couldn't believe I was saying this. And again, challenge me, ask me, and I will show you. And so that's what's happened to the Nobel team, is I've challenged them to come out with me and eyewitness a Sasquatch. And whether they accept the challenge or not is really up to them, because I will do it. I will take them out and I will show them a Sasquatch. And to me, I mean, humbly, accepting a Nobel Peace Prize for the discovery of a new people isn't something I really want. It's very flattering, and I would accept it just to help move the discovery process forward, because I really believe, I mean, I feel, obviously in the eyes of the world, even more so than winning a court case in Canada and the United States, I think in the eyes of the world, receiving a Nobel Peace Prize and proving to the Nobel crew that Sasquatch exists is really obviously much more significant than even winning the court cases. So I've challenged them. All they have to do is say yes, because I've already said yes. And this would be so important. This would be something that I would take out a bank loan to finance this expedition and pay for it myself. I don't know how it would work out, but if they accepted my challenge, I would go through a brick wall to make this expedition happen. I would just, yes is the answer. And so that's what I had the opportunity to do this morning. And what's amazing is I never would have said this, I never would have done this if I hadn't come to Sweden, met with this film crew, and been inspired in a way that they want me to continue the research. They want me to be, they've pushed me to do something that I find uncomfortable. Acknowledging the Sasquatch as a people is a really big deal, because people have rights, land rights, you know, land titles. They have, acknowledging the Sasquatch as a people, which is what they are sentient. And I also explained this to the lady at the Nobel Museum, and you know, so it's huge, it's enormous. I do this a lot. I hate to say it, but I do it a lot. I talk to enormous people all the time. Usually they don't accept my challenge. Usually they just brush it off for whatever reason. And honestly, this goes back to the haters that you didn't want me to discuss. a lot of times they'll look me up online, they'll find the paper for the polling report, and they'll go, oh, and they'll read it and go, oh, we're not doing it. So that's what disturbs me about the haters, right? Because they probably will look that up. Right now, however, I have so much success with media, Netflix, that if they do look me up online now, which was what everybody will do, there's so much good stuff being said that I'm far less controversial. And because of me going and fighting for positivity and doing this court case and releasing the documentary, I have a real opportunity to do this and succeed. And it's enormous, it's immense. And that's who I am, that's what I do. I'll take the challenge, not only, I don't begrudgingly accept this, I would be honored, it would be a privilege. Can you imagine taking a team of the Nobel crew? I don't know what you call them. I'll have to research this myself some more, because I just did this. Like, I just went there to look at, you know, Nobel stuff, and I just, right out of nowhere, boom, let's do this. And it's awesome. So we'll see what happens. I'm definitively going to pursue this, and I will keep, obviously, you all informed, because I mean, this never would have happened if you didn't bring me to Sweden, if you didn't have a discussion with me literally last night. And I call him my German stepson, Johan. I just love the kid to death. He wanted to, we walked around last night, and he wanted to go see the Nobel Museum, and I absolutely wanted to, so we went and saw it this morning, and boom, you know. No, it's not about no fear, it's about the truth, pushing the truth. Honestly, I really can do this, and that's all I did, is I spoke the truth today. I was brave enough to go and have a discussion. You know, push things, take risks. You have to do that in the discovery process. I was inspired by Einstein and Watts and the man who created X-rays. You know, they were saying the same things about how they were called liars, how they had to push through the discovery process, the 3 stages it goes through. First, the Bible says it's not, denies it, and then everybody calls it absolute garbage and says it can't be true, and then the 3rd process is final acceptance of what is truth in the discovery process. And I'm clearly in stage 2 in the process of moving to stage 3. So again, inspired by the great men and women of the Nobel Museum. So it's
now, Todd,
awesome.
You had mentioned to us in a private conversation that, you know, that obviously knowing that they were a people was something that you have held as a secret for a long time. Mm-hmm. You know, and that was due to, you said, because of the interest that the people have, and
right.
You know, mm-hmm. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, for
the powerful people in the industry. That
right. For a long time, I've really I have evidence to show that Sasquatch are actually definitively sentient, and I've really kept that to myself, because the fact that they are sentient and they are people, gorillas and chimpanzees are close to being considered immorally put in zoos, because they might be sentient, but they're not proven sentient, so we still have them in zoos. It would be unacceptable to take a sentient species and put them in a zoo. It would be slavery, which obviously we've abolished in today's day and age, for the most part, I sure hope anyways. But the knowledge that they're sentient is devastating, because forestry and oil and gas and all these industries that make hundreds of millions of dollars in North America, at the very least, where Sasquatch exist, their land rights would be lost, really, because indigenous people live there, and indigenous people immediately get rights. They have rights, and they deserve it. So the damage it would do to industry, to the money men, is enormously significant. And this has been proven in history. Even the grizzly bear population was considered threatened in an area I do research. And for 4 years, $400 million a year in industry was shut down to make sure the grizzly bear population, a known species, was okay. Can you imagine an unknown species of people? That discovery, that would probably shut down industry in those areas forever. So, and human beings and people really care about their money and their livelihood, and I respect that. So out of respect for the money that comes out of that industry, I kept this quiet until I was, you know, pushed and inspired. And people have been pushing me for a long time, and I was just uncomfortable moving forward with the knowledge there are people, which they clearly are. I mean, I have evidence to substantiate that is nobody will question. The bigger I see, the bigger I'll know they are. So it's winter here, though. It gets cold. I'm assuming they're bigger than the deer in Texas. There's a break right over there. That's a clean snap. Yeah, absolutely. We're gonna have to. There's another one in the same direction. Look,